Hi, you guys. Hi, friends. How are we doing? Welcome to Led to Gold. This is the podcast devoted to discussing all things growth and wellness. Welcome to episode 39. I'm so excited that you're here. And before we get into all of the things, I'm going to just take right here at the beginning of the episode to give us the spiel. If you have listened to the show before and you've enjoyed it, or if this is your first time and you get through it and you're like, I really like this, it would be so amazing and wonderful and helpful if you would take a moment to rate or review the podcast wherever you are currently listening. It's the best and easiest and fastest way to help other people find the show who might be interested in it. So that would be really wonderful if you want to take a moment to do that. And if you really like it and you're like, man, I could use a little bit more of this in my life, there are other places to find Led to Gold. Led to Gold is not only a podcast, it is also a blog. And I post new blog posts every adjacent Monday. So over here on the podcast, it's every other Monday. Over on the blog, it's the Mondays in between. So you are getting something from Led to Gold once a week, every single Monday, pretty much, if you follow along. And there is a link in the show notes of this episode to go and subscribe if you choose to do so. Subscribing is completely free, but it also means a great deal if you want to head over there. If you do subscribe, you get a monthly exclusive Spotify playlist and a cute little newsletter just chatting about the current vibes and what's going on, not just in my life, but kind of like in the collective. So just kind of putting feelers out there and chatting with one another. I love the newsletters. They are sort of the most intimate versions of my work, and it feels really fun and cute and like a little cozy community. And speaking of community, I do have an additional announcement specifically for the blog page, ledtogold.com. If you are a subscriber, or if you're thinking about being a subscriber, there is now the added bonus that when you subscribe, you also become a site member automatically. This is also completely free and low maintenance. There's nothing you need to do, but being a site member allows you to join in on the community center page of Led to Gold, which is brand new as of this past week. And that acts as kind of a community forum. So you can also do your own writings and sharing of ideas over there on the blog. And it's just kind of its own separate page. I call it the community center because that's what it feels like to me. And it just feels cute and exciting. And Led to Gold has sort of had this ethos for, I would say, its entirety of trying to bring community and humanity back together. Community care is a huge part of my work. This is something that I'm very passionate about, and I try to bring that lens onto pretty much everything that I do and talk about. And it just seemed right to have some form of a community conversation going on the website or somewhere that we could all do that and interact more easily. So it's not just me anymore. It's not just me writing, and I would love for you all to be a part of it. So whether or not you want to actually write or you want to just go check it out, the community center page is free for anybody to look at. Any published public posts are available to anybody. And I would love for you to go check it out. It's just like the blog. It's just not me writing it. So it's a pretty exciting new thing. And if you want to be a part of it, all you have to do is subscribe. So anyway, all the links for all that are in the show notes. Last few little things is I'm also on Instagram at led.to.gold. You can follow me again down in the show notes. And the very last thing is that I have some merch over at TeePublic. If you want to support me monetarily, that is a great way to do it. And that is the only way that I profit off of any of this stuff. So it is a big help if you choose to do so. There's shirts, there's mugs, there's stickers, there's pretty much whatever your little heart would ever desire. and I think the designs are pretty cool. I'm hoping to do some more pretty soon, and we will just have to see how that goes. But anyway, all of that's down below. Thank you for just being here. Just being here is enough and perfect, and I love you. So hi, let's get into the episode. This is the first time I've ever done a part 2 to a previous episode, and this is a part 2 to the episode from 2 weeks ago, episode 38, which was called A Different Kind of Sex Talk. So that is kind of what we're getting into today. I'm going to just go ahead and say, if you haven't listened to part 1, it would probably be beneficial for you to do so if you want to get into this conversation, because that one kind of lays the groundwork of where this is coming from for me. I'll do a little tiny recap here, but in general, I want to remind us that this really is not a conversation about PIV sex or really even like relationship counseling. There's definitely some aspects to this that could go into making your romantic partnership a little bit better, a little bit more fun, but that's not really the main point of this conversation. This is also really just not about like our collective understanding of sex. In fact, that's sort of the whole reason why I wanted to talk about it in the first place, is because Westerners in particular are very weird about sex and like what that even means. So we're getting into all of that, sort of the foundations, over in episode 38. And if you want to have that context going in, I would probably listen to that episode first. But if you're just here, hey, let's keep going. The whole point of this conversation, both part 1 and today, is to destigmatize sexual energy and destigmatize the act of talking about sex, because again, Westerners are pretty weird about that. It's a pretty taboo subject, yet our entire media culture is completely saturated with sexual and sexual adjacent content. And it's just a weird environment to be living in, because it's taboo. It's for a specific group of people at specific times in specific places. And yet again, I also think when I say that, there's probably some people that would immediately have like an alarm bell going off being like, well, yeah, no shit, you can't have sex anywhere. Again, this conversation is not really about like the act of having sex. There's other parts to it that we're going to get into. So I'm going to recap the why. Like, why should we destigmatize this? Why is this even an important conversation to be having? And again, there's more context in the previous episode, but the main idea is that we, as Westerners, as Americans, as so many of us, honestly, I would venture to say pretty much everybody, doesn't matter who you are so conditioned in shame that we consider our shameful feelings to be normal. So, in other words, we have been born into a society that shames certain things about our bodies and about our minds and about our desires that we grow up learning are not okay, or are only okay in very specific places, times, whatever, like I was saying. And just a lot of messaging that ends up being incredibly harmful, which again attributes to feeling so much shame. So when I say this, I'm thinking of things like, you should not want to have sex until marriage. You should feel bad about your body. You should want to improve your body or improve the way you look, improve the way you dress. There's a very strong need in all of this shameful messaging for like aspiring to be better, aspiring to be different in some way, aspiring to look or feel like other people or do the same things as other people. This gets into so many areas of our individual lives, but especially in the realm of sex, because we have magazines dedicated to it. We have media completely 1000% dedicated to it. Men grow up watching porn that is completely unlike what real sexual encounters are like. And that is just one small example in a sea of many, many things. I could spend hours just talking about the messaging that each of us receives in our culture throughout our entire lives. Even as little babies and toddlers, we are still getting this messaging. I mentioned the movie and the musical Grease in part 1 of this conversation, and I absolutely love Grease. I love it so much. I've loved it ever since I was a little kid. I watched it with my family when I was like 5, which is maybe a little bit problematic. And the reason why is just because a lot of people I now know have a real problem with the messaging of that movie, which is basically just to say nobody is going to like you or appreciate you until you completely change who you are and, you know, start wearing makeup and start wearing sexy outfits. Like, nobody's going to take you seriously or want to have sex with you or want to be with you until you change your entire personality and vibe, which is true. Not the best messaging in any musical I've ever seen, that's for sure. But yet that's a super prominent messaging that we get in society, is that if you want people to like you, if you want people to want to be friends with you, if you want people to not make fun of you, then you do need to assimilate in specific ways, aka how you dress, how you act, the people that you associate with, the people that you talk to. And we've had plenty of conversations about this before on Lead to Gold. In some regards, it's not inherently a bad thing that humans feel the need to assimilate with one another, right? Because without other humans, you're going to live a pretty miserable life. We need each other. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we need all of the shame that we get from this societal messaging. And there's just so much of it. There are so many weird little rules that we have established for not only ourselves, but like the ways that our bodies should look, the ways that dating should work, the gender binary, the ways that we do have intimacy with other people. There's rules about all of it. But the thing that's weird and the thing that's interesting is that most of this stuff we do in private. So should we really be having all of these social norms around our bodies or our private intimacy with our partners? Like, at the end of the day, who is that actually affecting aside from yourself? So I find this really interesting, and I really just wanted to harp on the fact that we grow up steeped in shame. We grow up knowing and understanding and embodying shame. Embodiment is really a big part of the direction that I want to take for this part 2 of the conversation, is how do we break the habit of embodying shame like we have learned to do throughout our entire lives, and then instead embody confidence, embody sexiness, but not sexiness in the way that you might initially think of it. How do we embody soft power? How do we embody, I fuck with myself, like I love myself, and you should love me too because I'm great, right? Like, that is just not most people's default. If it is their default when they are little, it gets beaten out of them the vast majority of the time. I think some of the ways that we might start to think about this is that, first off, there's a lot of conversations happening right now in the past couple of years about what social norms and the status quo are actually serving us. And I think most of us are finding that a lot of it doesn't serve us. A lot of it is actually more harmful than it is helpful. So there is nothing wrong with questioning and analyzing the current status quo that we live under. And that might be slightly different for different people and in different areas, and especially in different cultures. But whatever status quo you are living under, aka, I feel like my status quo in my life and my culture is that women are supposed to be constantly on diets, constantly trying to make themselves thinner and smaller and prettier. And girls my age need to be buying skincare products, need to be constantly keeping up with their appearances. getting filler, getting Botox, getting surgery is completely fine and acceptable. And I'm not saying that it's not. Like, do truly whatever you want to do with your own body. None of this is inherently bad. I think what is bad is the fact that we are all somewhat expected to do this, or to at least want this. So kind of getting familiar with what is expected of you and then questioning it. Like, do I actually want or need filler? Do I actually want or need to dress a certain way? Do I want or need to experience my sexual life in a different way? Do I want or need to be friends with different kinds of people or appeal to a certain kind of person? These are all things that we are somewhat expected to do, but like, why? You know, where does that come from? Why is that expected of me? And is it actually necessary? So the bottom line with that is just that, you know, not all social norms need to be followed. Not all of the expectations under whatever current status quo you live under need to be followed, need to be seen through. Because in most cases, especially in the one that I find myself in, and the one that I think a lot of us are in, it is quite literally impossible to live under that status quo perfectly. We can't do it. I mean, we all know perfection is impossible in every aspect, but yeah, status quos are not feasible for the vast majority of us, and that's okay. So why don't we try to get a little bit more comfortable with what is possible and what is attainable and sustainable for us, rather than continuing to live with and carry the shame that we have carried for most of our lives, if not all of it. This is reminding me a little bit of a post that I saw earlier today on Environment, which is an Instagram page, obviously focused on the climate and culture surrounding environmental issues. And as you hopefully know, it is Pride Month at this point, and they posted something about queerness being a part of nature. And yet again, we have a nice little intersection here, because a common theme on this show is talking about how humans are nature. But it's weird because just so many people don't seem to understand that or fully grasp that. The fact that humans are animals and that we're not really that special in the animal kingdom, other than the fact that we are incredibly intelligent. That's great. I think even more importantly, it's that we are empathetic, which is great. But something that this post brought up was the comment section, where I really got to see just how confused people seem to be about the concept of humans being synonymous with nature. Like, we are a part of it. We are not separate from it. And I bring this up just to say the whole point of this post was to point out breaking of the binary in the animal kingdom, how there are so many examples of different animal species breaking our own human societal norms, which makes sense. But I wanted to read you a few versions of this, a few examples, and then read you a few comments, because it's quite startling, in my own opinion, how this is so hard for some people to understand. So anyway, the post is called "Queerness is a Part of Nature." And on the first page, it says, animals, plants, and fungi have been documented to have a spectrum of sexes, sexualities, and genders. Here are some examples of queerness in the natural world. Bonobo monkeys have more same-sex encounters than heterosexual ones. Most bonobos are bisexual, and it is believed that their sexual behaviors are a way to create bonds. Another one says, same-sex behavior has been found in about 1,500 species, including penguins, lions, bottlenose dolphins, orcas, monkeys, and some lizards. And then the last page says, nature knows no heterosexual or gender binaries. The natural world often breaks binaries imposed by societal standards. Exactly the point that I was trying to make earlier. So then here's the crazy thing, is that some of these comments just seem to kind of miss the point. This one really got to me. Love seeing stuff like this. Quote, lizards can do it. Why can't we? Like, bruh, we aren't lizards. The other funny thing too is that some of the replies to that comment try to clap back. They try to explain why this is fine. And it completely is. I'll read a couple more. Somebody said, that's like saying lizards eat. Why can't we? We're not lizards, but we also eat. Sexuality isn't a lizard specific trait. And then that person responded again, neither is eating. Every single organism in the universe eats. We are not any of the animals listed here, so the gender, sex bullshit does not apply to us. And it goes on, but I really feel like this isn't hard to understand. Why doesn't it apply to humans? Humans are animals, right? So anyway, I don't want to get into the weeds about that one specific status quo trying to be broken, or that one societal norm trying to be broken rather. But I wanted to use that as an example just to show why and how so many people seem to be pushing back on this idea. And again, how deeply rooted this shame is, especially for queer folks and people who are oppressed, people who have been historically oppressed, who are now coming into their own personal freedoms more than they've ever been able to. This is still a huge issue because there is still so much societal expectation and so much pushing down, pushing back. And a lot of that is done through shaming. The last little tidbit that I just want to offer here in this part of the conversation is to say, I understand that it is not always beneficial to question the status quo and to question every single social norm that we have. Social norms are beneficial in certain ways. It's like I was saying a couple minutes ago, we have them for a reason. Humans are social creatures. We do need to have some social norms that keep us safe and that keep others safe. Things that will not get us cast out from whatever social group we are trying to be a part of. Because if that happened, we would go life alone, and that would be really lonely and shitty, and you don't have help. So it's not to say that social norms are not always good. Some of them are. The ones that we are talking about in this conversation, the ones that utilize shame, the ones that want everybody to be the same and want everybody to be heteronormative and stay within the binary and stay ashamed of their creativity and their body and the ways that they interact intimately with other humans, like these things should be questioned, in my opinion, because for the most part, this doesn't affect anybody else other than those closest to you. And most of the time, it's really just a matter of working within yourself. So I know that this kind of question everything can get into a rabbit hole of ideas that we might not always want to welcome. But if we keep it within the conversation of liberation from shame, then this is a benefit. This is a large benefit to the vast majority of us. Having less shame equals having more confidence. It opens the gateway to being able to have more fun and feel more liberated in our own lives, and more creativity. Like we feel more open and more abundant and more able to act and produce creatively, which we are also going to get into because that was a large part of part one's conversation on how sexual energy and creativity are quite synonymous. Like if you put a Venn diagram of like sexual energy and creative energy, it would pretty much be a full circle. Having less shame quite literally opens us up to the idea of a more fulfilled life. It opens us. When we feel confident, we walk taller. Like we have a different stature. We are more open and present in our daily lives. We walk around differently. We feel different. And that is really important. That is the goal, right? Without doing some of these practices of unlearning unnecessary shame, we get to have more of those confident and alive and exciting experiences in our lives. And who doesn't want that? So I want to start off this section of the episode just by saying, I want to bring up the quote of, does she have no shame? Like that. I don't know if we hear that very often anymore. I feel like it's a little bit of an outdated term, but I know back in the day it was very common to say, like, she has no shame, or he has no shame, or they have no shame, or, you know, it's used as a weapon to say whatever you're doing is foolish, whatever you're doing is embarrassing, and you should be embarrassed, and you're too much. It's all synonymous. And that phrase and that idea, that expectation that we have of other people has always held us down. So I want to break that. I want to attempt to break that. The first thing that we can do in unlearning unnecessary shame is to get clear about what we feel ashamed of. And that can be hard, and that can be time consuming, and it might be a little bit painful. But if you are somebody who gets into journaling, if you are somebody who is open to the idea of exploring this part of yourself, I think it would 100% be worth meditating on. So identify what are some parts of your life in which you feel shame. One example might be, I am ashamed of having so much premarital sex. Maybe that comes from the fact that you grew up in a religious household and that was not the expectation of you. That was not what was socially acceptable. That was not the norm. You were supposed to wait until sex. Maybe you have shame around your sexuality because it breaks from the social norm of what you grew up under. I can say personally, I have always had shame around my personality, because I feel like quite often somebody who talks too much is annoying. Nobody actually really cares about what I have to say. And, you know, that whole vibe. I'm too much. That's a big thing. Like, people get sick of me easily. I've always had shame around that feeling. And I think the reason that that comes up for me is because I have distinct memories of peers in elementary school telling me that I was annoying, or telling me to go away, or, you know, like just generally not being interested in talking to me. And it didn't happen all the time. Like, I had friends, but you know how those things go. You remember the moments that hurt the most, and that has stuck with me. So yeah, like I remember kids telling me that I was too loud. And it's funny, actually, not that we need to get into my personal life too much on this, but I did talk loud because I had a hearing impediment. I was 90% deaf in one of my ears as a kid, and I had to get surgery. And after that, I probably wasn't so loud, but I was quite literally hard of hearing. So I had to ask people to speak up, and I couldn't hear myself speaking that well. So there's the reason for it, but other kids don't know that. And as a little kid, it's kind of hard to explain that. So there's still shame around me being too loud and me being too obnoxious and annoying. And that is something that has stuck with me into my adult life. I still grapple with that from time to time. So I hope it's clear that there are many ways in which shame can manifest. There are many parts of our lives in which it manifests, and it does not just have to do with like the sexual realm. Mine has to do with my personality. There's so many places. You might be ashamed of your body. You might be ashamed of the way your house looks, or the hobbies that you're interested in that you don't really know a lot of other people that are interested in it. So many things. Like it goes on and on because of our stupid social norms. So it's important to first identify those things, what you are ashamed of. And then the healing begins when you are able to kind of reach into that part of yourself, identify where it comes from. In other words, like with mine, I was 4, 5, 6 years old when I was getting that messaging of you are loud, you are annoying, you are too much. And then if you can practice giving love to that part of yourself or that version of yourself. Give love and attention to them. So that would look like me having a conversation with my inner 6-year-old being like, you are not too much. You are not too loud. You have an actual hearing impediment, and you know this, but it's hard to understand that when you're little. It's hard for other people to understand that about you. So validating that the shame is unnecessary, validating that you are fine and wonderful the way you are, and really, really spending some time on that part of the journey can be a huge help. And that's really where we start to heal those parts of ourselves that have shame. So that's my first thing. And again, this can take time. There's probably, if you're anything like me, many things that we are ashamed of and many things that don't come as easily to us as the example that I just gave. I would have to think a lot longer and harder about other things that I am ashamed of. And that takes time. That also takes a lot of mental fortitude. It can be painful. So be gentle with yourself in that process if it's something that you want to choose to do. But then here's another strategy that I actually just learned from a friend, Faye Boehm. I'll put her link in the description if you are interested in checking out her work. But I just learned about a nervous system theory through her and an embodiment practice that you can do to kind of move through this shame and like these icky feelings and into a state of more relaxed energy. It's really nice. It's called, the theory is called the polyvagal theory. And I'm going to read a little bit of an article to you. I'll put the links in for this as well if you would like to read more. And I want to also point out before I read it that there are some questionable parts of this theory. I think certain areas of it have been debunked, but I want to just give us context to explain how this embodiment practice works. And then I liked the messaging. I liked the definitions of these nervous system areas because it kind of helps you to create a visual for like how you should feel in each stage. So let's get into that. The polyvagal theory is heavily related to the vagus nerve, which is part of our nervous system. And this was identified first by Dr. Stephen Porges. And he basically talks about the different aspects of the vagus nerve. There's the dorsal, which is the back of this nerve, and then the ventral, which is the front. So basically the theory is that we, throughout our day and throughout different experiences, kind of switch between these. It comes from scanning our environment. From the time we're born, we are intuitively scanning our environment for cues of safety and cues of danger. So within his polyvagal theory, Porges describes the 3 evolutionary stages involved in the development of our autonomic, is that how you say it? Autonomic nervous system, rather than simply suggesting that there's a balance between our sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems. Porges describes a hierarchy of responses built into our autonomic nervous system. Am I saying that right? That sounds really wrong. Whatever. The 3 stages are, first, immobilization, or in other words, the dorsal nerve having precedence over the other parts of the nervous system. So, described as the oldest pathway, this involves an immobilization response. The dorsal side of the vagus nerve responds to cues of extreme danger, causing us to become immobile. And I think when they say immobile, it doesn't necessarily mean like you are quite literally frozen. It just means like you feel stuck. It is hard to move. You are slow. You are kind of just like in your feelings. And we all experience this. I'll give more detail in just a little bit. This causes us to respond to fear by becoming frozen, numb, and or shutting down. It's as if our parasympathetic nervous system is kicking into overdrive as our response causes us to freeze rather than simply slow down. Then there is mobilization, which is where the sympathetic nervous system takes over. And this is kind of how a lot of us live day to day. So the way that my friend Faye describes it is that we are either, most of the time, in the dorsal stage or in the sympathetic stage. So the dorsal stage is where we are kind of frozen in fear. We are stuck. We can't move our emotions. We kind of just want to lay in bed and rot, versus the sympathetic stage, which is feeling like you have to do everything at once. Like it's your overdrive. We tap into this, and that helps us mobilize in the face of a danger cue. So it's kind of like in the back of our minds, we're afraid of something. So we are going to go into overdrive, be overproductive to the point of burnout. Like we are going to go do anything and everything to distract ourselves from feeling like we are in danger. So it's kind of like an adrenaline rush, perhaps a little bit longer term. And then the final part is the ventral stage. So this is the front side of the vagus nerve, and this part of the vagus nerve responds to feelings of safety and connection. Social engagement allows us to feel anchored, which is facilitated by the ventral vagus pathway. In this space is where we feel safe, calm, connected, and engaged. And there's also one other little point on this article that I want to read to you. As we go through life engaging with the world, there are inevitably moments when we will feel safe and others when we will feel discomfort or danger. Polyvagal theory suggests this space is fluid and that we can move in and out of these different places within the hierarchy of responses relatively easily. So the last thing that I want to make clear, and I think this is where the theory itself gets a little bit of flack, is because when we learn about the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, we learn that those are triggered by very specific events. And there's no way for us to really like hack into that. It is purely instinctual. The polyvagal theory suggests that we can kind of trigger these emotions and these feelings ourselves. So I want to talk a little bit about that. This is getting very long-winded. I'm realizing that. But it's okay. We're going to talk about it. There is a way that you can embody the different stages of this theory. In other words, you can embody the dorsal stage, you can embody the sympathetic stage, and you can embody the ventral stage. There are ways to flow between this. So I say all of this to say, if you are in a state of identifying what you are ashamed of and being able to kind of get tapped into that part of you, and you are wanting to do some healing work around it, this is what my friend Faye has taught me. This is the suggestion, is that you can put yourself in a state of dorsal energy. In other words, get familiar with that feeling of shame and really feel it in your body. Tell yourself the things that you heard, either from yourself or from other people, that made you feel ashamed, that made you feel like you had to be ashamed of that part of you. Maybe put on some music that reminds you of that time in your life. And when I say embody it, I mean like get on the floor, get in fetal position, like curl up your hands, push them into a ball, like squeeze yourself tight, feel the energy, like embody the energy of being closed and stuck. And once you're there for a while and you're kind of steeping in that energy, then you can start to move yourself into the sympathetic stage, which is ultimately to say you recognize how shitty this has made you feel over so much time and how many years perhaps you have spent steeping yourself in shame. And it's not your fault, but just like living in that and not knowing what to do with it. So you get angry, you get activated, you might start kicking things, you might start throwing or punching a pillow. You're moving around more. You are embodying sacred anger and upset and unfairness. Like you are getting activated about this. And then once you have spent enough time in that stage, you start to tire out. That sticky, icky, long feeling of just anger and resentment and shame and all of the bad shit, it gets old. But when you allow yourself a space to actually act it out and move through it, then you don't want to feel that way anymore after a while. So you move into the ventral stage, which means you finally feel yourself relax. You've had enough of feeling angry and tired and just gross about all of this. So you let yourself relax. Maybe you let the music change into something that's calming, something that feels good, something that feels like yummy and flowy that you actually want to like dance to in a way that makes you feel really good about yourself. And you stay there for a while. And then you start to feel like how enjoyable and nice that sensation is. And you're like, man, why don't I just hang out here all the time? Of course, we're not just naturally there all the time, but doing this enough and practicing this intentionally can start to have us understanding like, oh, I can actually get myself here. I don't have to sit in all of those icky feelings. I don't have to work through that all the time. I can do that work and then I can move through into this part of the journey. That in and of itself is somatics, that is embodiment, that is the practice that actually helps us to get feelings out of our bodies, which is really nice. And I'm learning more about it. I absolutely love it. I would love to hear any of your all's thoughts about embodiment practices or if you've heard of anything similar, but I just absolutely loved this suggestion as a practice. So again, I know that was long-winded, but that is something that we can do to long-term unlearn our shame and the things that make us feel ashamed. So from there, I have a few other little suggestions. Hopefully they don't take quite as long to explain, but I think another thing that helps us once we start to get used to this feeling of I can be in this state, I can be relaxed, I can feel good about myself, feel good about my life, and like not feel guilty about that because there's nothing wrong with that. Then we can start to get familiar with the idea of creating simply because we want to. And that can be whatever. That could be painting. That could be making a podcast, having great conversations. This is another thing that I got a little bit into at the end of part 1, but I wanted to give more attention to this because I feel like this is the true work. And this is what ties the conversation back to sexual/sensual energy. They are one and the same. When we start to allow ourselves to feel more relaxed in our day-to-day lives, we are more open to the idea of tapping into creative energy just because we want to. Capitalism and living under capitalism gives us the messaging that we create in order to produce, and there is no other way. There is no other possibility because you don't have the time and you don't have that luxury. If you need to make money, then you need to produce. And that is really societally, like that's all we have time for is like the creation that produces things, the creation that profits or gives us profit or gives somebody else profit. Like that is what creation is for. But that is not exactly what it has to be for. Again, that goes back to the societal norms. We question that. We say, okay, but like, why can't I just create because I want to? I'm happy to see more people embracing this idea, but I think it would be wonderful if we all could in some ways. Like, when was the last time that you sat down and engaged in a creative activity, not to sell it and not to show it off and not to have a finished product, but just because it felt good? Just because it was fun, just because it gave you some good like life force energy. Maybe it's been a while. Is there any way that you can carve time into your day to invite that in? Because that is the greatest energy that helps us to kind of unlearn whatever we have built up and learned to be ashamed of over time. Create just because you want to. And the very last thing that I will say on this is to, on a similar note, tap into whatever it is that you desire and crave. So that could be activities, that could be foods, that could be people, that could be experiences. What are the things that you desire more of? What are the things that you crave more of in your life? Journal about them so that you have a space to like actually, I don't want to say manifest. That's what I was about to say. And if you're into that, like absolutely you can manifest it. But put it down on paper just so you can have a place to look back on it and remind yourself like, okay, I want this. And then how do I reach for it? How do I attain more of it? Experience pleasure for pleasure's sake. Some of our desires and cravings take work, of course. But you know what? It's like, it could be as simple as like, you know what? I'm craving chocolate right now. I'm going to go get myself a chocolate milkshake because I can. And just allowing a little bit more time and energy for things like that in your life. We don't always want to overdo it, but why not? You know, who's it hurting? So try to kind of tap into that energy as much as you can as you are doing the work of unlearning your shame. As you unlearn, you start to rewire and relearn the idea that pleasure is not a luxury. Pleasure is not something that I have to have sparingly. It's not like candy. It's not like sugar. It is a human feeling, and it's okay to have pleasure whenever you want it. It's totally okay. What could be wrong with that? Practice lovingly sending guilt away as you do this, because that's also something that I find that comes in a lot. Even with something as simple as food, even with something as simple as, I want a chocolate milkshake, I'm going to have a chocolate milkshake. I can't even imagine how many, I literally just did this the other day. That's why it's coming to me. But it's like throughout having it, you know, I'm sitting on my couch, I'm watching a show, I'm drinking a chocolate milkshake, and definitely the thought creeps in of like, I really didn't need this chocolate milkshake. Like, I really should be eating healthier. I really shouldn't be just like doing this all the time. But that's the thing, is that I don't do it all the time. It's not bad for me to have a chocolate milkshake every so often. And so you lovingly send the guilt away. You say, hey, I see you. I hear you. But I don't need that right now. That's okay. I see that you're looking out for me. I see that you want me to fit in. I see that you want me to remember the social norms that I've been built and raised on. But honestly, this is not something that's helping me right now. So thank you. Thanks for stopping by, but I'm okay. I'm good. This chocolate milkshake is not going to hurt me. You know? And I've been trying to practice that more. It's hard because when you're not present with it and when you're new to it, you don't always remember. You kind of let those thoughts creep in, and then they stick around, and then you might feel guilty the next morning, and you might be like, oh, I got to like work out extra hard today because I had that stupid chocolate milkshake. But the more you practice, it's like anything else that you could practice. The more you do it, you get used to recognizing those messages coming back up, wanting to mess up your day, wanting to mess up your pleasure. And you say, hey, love you. Thank you for looking out for me. I see what you're trying to do. It's all good. We are all good here. Try it out sometime. Try it out if you remember. And along with everything else, like all of the little journaling topics that you could potentially use, there's a lot in our toolbox here for this work. And if you have any additional things that you have done in your own pleasure practices and or unlearning shame practices, I would love to know, so we could maybe even, I don't know if we'll have a part 3 on this, but even like continue the conversation in another episode or on the blog. If you have some ideas around this and you want to share them in the community center on Lead to Gold, I would welcome the heck out of that. So all up to you. I would just love to hear from you. Let me know if there are things you want to add to this conversation, because it's a good one and it's an important one. And I think the last little thing that I wanted to just note in here is all the way at the very beginning of this episode, we're talking about unlearning social norms, questioning the status quo. And hey guys, I don't know if you're into astrology, but Pluto is in Aquarius, and that is the work that we are meant to be doing if you're into that kind of thing. In fact, I have a blog post on that too, and I'll put that in the show notes, because why not? If you want to read a little bit more about that. Question it. It's fine. These are good questions. Okay, I've said my piece. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed that. Let's finish today's episode with our usual game of We're Not Really Strangers from the Healing Expansion Pack. At the end of every episode, I always just pull one of these cards and we'll talk about it together. If you already have your journal out, we've been talking a lot about journaling in this episode, feel free to start with this. It's sometimes quite relevant to whatever we were just talking about. So here we go. Here's the question for today. Ooh, I just pulled this one right out and it's ready to go. So what is your body telling you today? This is good. This is like a nice little quick embodiment practice. Just get into your body, feel it, do a quick body scan, feel if there's any pressure anywhere, any stress. What is your body telling you today? Mine is telling me that we're honestly feeling really good, really limber, relaxed, which I love. Maybe that's part of why this conversation wanted to come out today, because I'm just like, I'm feeling it, so I want to share it because it's a nice, good feeling. What else? I'm feeling like I want a little bit more movement in my day today. So something I try to do this every Sunday, and it is Sunday today. It's the day before this episode's coming out. I'm procrastinating. I try to do some sort of, I don't know if I would really even call it yoga. It's not the traditional yoga. It's more of just like a stretching, a little dancing, a little just like movement. I try to do that every Sunday evening right before I go to bed. And I'm not always the best at it, but I would definitely love to be able to do it today. I am feeling the need for it. So hopefully that happens. We'll see. How about you? What is your body telling you today? What do you need right now? What does your body need? Are you hungry? I'm getting a little hungry. I might need to hop off and go eat something. So thanks again for being here. I love you so, so much. I hope that you are doing well wherever you are. I hope that the universe is sending you some good signs to work on unlearning some shame. And if that's not the message right now, just kind of lean in and listen. You know, what else needs to be worked on? Maybe nothing needs to be worked on. That's another little thing that I've been trying to embrace more often too, is because part of being in the wellness community on social media, or just like in general being interested in wellness, part of that messaging is that like there's always something to heal, something to fix. And I'm trying to, especially now getting into summer and like I don't really have a whole lot going on, I'm trying to really lean into, you know what? I don't actually think I need to fix or change or do anything right now. I think I can just be, which is a good feeling. So I don't know. Wherever you are, I hope you're well. And again, thank you for being here. I love you, and we will talk again quite soon. If you want to go check out the blog, I'll see you over there this coming Monday. And if not, I'll see you here in a separate Monday, 2 Mondays from now. You know the gig. All right. Bye.